It's important that we maintain a good organized project bin because late game, it's going to be pretty annoying if things aren't organized and you're going to be wondering where things are. So what we're going to do is make a new bin. That's essentially a folder. And I'm going to call it raw video. That's where I'm going to put everybody's videos. So I'm going to right click raw video and select import. And here are all my actors' videos. I have an alto, a bass, a soprano, a tenor 1, and a tenor 2. I'm going to select them all and hit open. And they will import into my project under the bin raw video. If I want, I can rename them all so they're a little bit more appealing. So now that we have everybody's videos imported, we need to sync them up together. The easy way is to open each person's video independently and add what's called a marker into a really pretty easily identifiable place on their clip. So I'm going to do that right now with bass. I'm going to open bass's clip and I'm going to press play and I'm going to see what we're working with here. Okay, right when he started to sing da 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 doom da doom is, I think, a good place because that's where the beatboxer comes in and it's really easy to count down. So I'm going to rewind it a little bit. And the easy way to add a marker is just to press M on your keyboard. That will add a marker to the bass clip and it'll be there forever. When we drag it onto the timeline, it'll still be there and we can see exactly where it is. And it'll be really easy to sync up the clips. So I'm going to press play, count down aloud, and then just press M on my keyboard when the beat drops. Hey, future me butting in here. Turns out the software I was using to record my voice and also the output of my computer didn't really sync them together, so my timing might seem off, but I promise you it was correct. Don't let it disturb you. There you go. Right on his da-da-da-doom-da-doom, we have a marker. Now we're going to close his video and open the next one.
Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown on purpose.
3, 4, M. Okay, now I'm just going to fast forward and go through all the other clips. Okay, so we've come to our alto's clip, and as you can see, she's wearing earbuds, which isn't a huge problem, and I've included her on purpose because you can see how to do it in case someone wears earbuds anyway. So basically, it's the same as everything else, you just have to kind of guess what's going on with the audio. So let's press play and see what we're dealing with here.
Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown.
1, 2, 3, 4, M. Okay, that was still pretty good. She sings in rhythm, so we're good to go. So now that we have the markers put on everybody's tracks, we're going to drag them onto the timeline. Let's start with our alto. Click, drag into the timeline, let go. Now we're going to get a clip mismatch warning. We can select either to change the sequence settings to match the clip we're dragging on or keep existing settings. In fact, you can see the conflict right up here. Our alto's video is recorded at 30 frames per second, and remember our sequence is set to be 29.97 frames per second. But I chose 29.97 on purpose, so I'm going to keep that setting and keep existing settings. Boom, there she is. And you can even see that's the indication that our marker is on her track at 11 seconds and 12 frames. So let's add the next person. We'll add bass. You can see that their markers aren't aligned, so we need to align them so that they're singing in sync. Pretty easy. You just drag one clip to match the other one, and then a little red line will appear vertically, and also the little black markers upon the markers will show you that they're successfully aligned, and you can just release. You want to make sure you have this magnet tool enabled. This is what it looks like if it's disabled. This is what it looks like if it's enabled. That way it'll snap to, and you can rest assured that they're as close as they'll get. In fact, I'll zoom in. You can see that they are as close as they'll get. In this instance, they're not matched exactly. You can tell that there's a little bit of a distance between the two of them. However, remember, our alto recorded at 30 frames per second and our bass recorded at 29.97 frames per second. So they don't match up exactly, but you can rest assured that they are as close as they'll get if you have the magnet tool on, and that's where it wanted you to drop it. So let's just give it a quick test. I'm going to turn off the video tracks and minimize this video track because there's no reason we have to see her preview. And so we're not going to see anything up here, but we'll hear their audio together. And we just want to make sure that they're pretty much synced. Good enough. So let's add our soprano now. Drag her in. Manually align her. And we're good to go. Let's test to make sure everything's working. Good enough. I like that. Drag on our tenor. And I'll just fast forward and let you know if something interesting happens. Okay, I just added everybody's tracks and I double checked that they're all synced up. It's really important to double check at every step that we go because we're going to be building on our previous steps. And if one of our previous steps ends up to not be what we wanted, it's going to be really hard to adjust it and go from there. You can trust me because I've had to do this a trillion times. I literally had to remake one of my first videos because I found a better way to do it. So let's just zoom in. Here's our gut check. They're all looking the same. And then our another gut check is when we press play. They're synced up. Okay, so we're missing an important thing right here. We're missing the actual mixed audio. So let's make a new bin for audio. Right click our new bin, choose import, and select our mixed audio that was made for us by our music director. Okay, now that we have our file imported, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a marker in the audio track in the same location that I put the markers in everybody else's track. So I'm going to double click to open it here in the middle, press play.
Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown.
1, 2, 3, 4, M. That might have been a little early, I can tell, but let's just see how it ends up. It's important that you drag it onto the timeline at a new track beneath everything else, because if it goes above, the video tracks are not going to be the same as the audio tracks. For example, video 1 is our alto and audio 1 is our alto, and video 4 is our tenor 1 and audio 4 is our tenor 1. But if we have our audio track up here as our first track, everything's going to be off by 1. So it's best if your audio lives on the bottom of all the rest of your audio tracks. So let's align it to everything else. See if we can find where it is. And I'll press play just to make sure everything is aligned properly. Okay, that was pretty bad, as you can hear. So I'm going to mute the golden track and see what's going on here. Okay, so everybody is together. It's just the song that's off. So I'm going to double click the golden track to bring it up in our source monitor again. And I'm going to click on the marker, right click, and clear current marker. And I'm just going to try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's see if that worked any better. Now I'm going to realign. Let's give it a play. Okay, good enough. Okay, now we've imported everything that we need. We've put it all into the master sequence, and everything on the timeline is synced together. And we've triple and quadruple checked that everything is synced up. The next thing to do is cut everybody's clip down so there's a common starting place. The easiest way to do this is to just cut to the song like this. I'm going to drag the start to there, drag the start to there, drag the start, and drag the start. You can see everybody's now starting at the beginning of the song, and that's a pretty good starting place. However, I'm going to show you what happens if someone started recording a little bit late, a little bit after the song started. So let's say our bass actually started recording here. Let's see if that interferes with anything. It doesn't interfere with anything. He just pressed the record button a little bit late. So this is pretty important to do, and if you miss this step, it's going to be a headache in the future. I'm going to right click here, add a new item, black video. Just hit OK. It'll come up with the default values. I'm going to drag in the black video onto our timeline. I don't want it to interfere with any of the current videos. So I'm going to put it over here, and it needs to basically act as a placeholder for our base. And I'll tell you why that's important later. But now everything starts exactly at the same time. And I can actually move them to the beginning so it makes more sense. So now we have everybody lined up at the beginning. There's a common starting place. And if there's a track that does not have a common starting place, we've substituted in black video to make up for that lack of bass video. So now we whip out our storyboard and add markers on our master sequence on the timeline where the scene changes are going to be. So as you can see, I have 4 scenes that I've storyboarded out. There's one that starts on teenage, one that starts on running around, one starts on who gives a damn, and one starts on no giving up. So what I'm going to do is just play through the video and do the same thing that I did before and press M on every scene change pretty much on the beat. So let's see if I can do that. I'll press play and I'll count down. Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, 3, 4, running around like a clown on purpose. Who gives a damn about the family you come from? No giving up when you're young and you want some. Okay, so there we go. I added my 4 scene changes in, and I'm actually going to just bring everybody's video down to there because they recorded the entire song and I'm just showing you a tutorial. So I just have a couple sequences. So I'm just going to end it there. Okay, so here's the point where we get to double check that the markers that I've added that have appeared here at the top of the master sequence timeline, that those are correct. So here's where we can do something fun. I'm going to add 2 new color mats. One is going to be like red. I'm going to call it red. And one is going to be blue. I'm going to use these to double check that I got my scene transitions correctly marked. So first I'm just going to drag in my blue, move it to exactly where I put the marker, and I'm going to alternate the colors all throughout the entire video, the entire sequence. So it goes red, blue. Okay, as you can see, I actually got the snap to wrong on this clip right here. You can see there's a little space. So I'm going to zoom in and make sure I mark it exactly on that beat. So let's see if it worked. Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown on purpose. Who gives a damn about the family you come from? No giving up. Okay, so transitions 1 and 3 were pretty good, but I think 2 and 4 could use a little bit of manual adjusting. So let's see. I think the audio changes a little bit after the video changes. Circus running around. You know, that actually looks pretty good. No, the video's a little late, so I'm going to go in there and move the transition between red and blue by holding Control on Windows. I think it just must be Command on Mac. And that allows you to adjust both clips together and they keep hugging each other. I'm going to move it back a couple frames. Let's see what happens. So that's way late now. I'm going to move it forward again. Okay, I think I might have gone the wrong way. There we go. So that's a little bit closer. Going to zoom in a little bit more. Let's see. That looks good to me. So we're going to modify where that marker is. So I want to remove this marker that I put in at the wrong place by accident. And I can use a shortcut to navigate exactly to the beginning of this clip. That's Shift Home on a big keyboard, I guess. I don't know if Mac has those keys. Now our time slider selector thingy is right at the beginning. And I'm going to press M. And that will add a marker where I want the transition to be. And I said 4 was a little bit off too, so let's check that one. Actually, that looks pretty good. So now that I've made some changes, I'm going to recheck everything again.
Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown on purpose. Who gives a damn about the family you come from? No giving up when you...
Okay, that looks good to me. So now that we know exactly where our markers are and where they should be, I can just remove this because that was just performing a double check. So here's the fun part. We get to cut every video that exists on this master sequence according to our scene transitions. So I'm going to select the cutting tool over here. It's called the razor tool. And then I'm going to hold shift and it's going to cut all the clips to where I want them to be. First, I'm going to cut it on the first scene change, then the second scene change. And this is actually going to be tough because the snap to tool is on. So it's going to try to choose which thing I want to snap to. So I'm actually going to zoom in and make sure I select the exact right frame, so it doesn't by accident snap to one of these markers over here. Okay, there we go. Now we have our scenes that, according to our storyboard, perfectly snipped where we want them to be. And our transitions are effectively our markers. Okay, now what we have to do is nest each clip individually. And I'll explain what that means while I'm doing it. First, I'm going to make a new bin. I'm going to call it nested. Those are where my nested clips are going to go. And for each individual track, I'm going to highlight it. It'll highlight both the video track and the audio track. Right click and select nest. What that does is kind of make like a wrapper around the video clip. Basically adds one layer of, I guess, abstraction, if you can think about it that way. So if I double click this quote unquote nested sequence, I can now see the old video got put into this nested sequence. That's why they call it a nest. Just so I can remember what it was, I'm going to rename it. That was tenor 2. I'm also going to rename it up here. I think this is a bug. It should rename them in both places, but it doesn't. So you can see that we have a new sequence, a sequence that contains the video from our tenor 2. And now that we can select between the two sequences up here, now that we have more than one sequence, I'm going to drag it into the nested folder. I'm going to repeat the process for every single clip. Okay, we've reached our bass clip, and if you can remember, he started recording a little bit after everybody else did and a little bit after the song started, so we had to put this black video in. The reason this is so important is because we want to include it in the nested clip. Right click, nest. Now you can see everything's aligned. It's a little bit more visually appealing, but more importantly, the black video has pushed forward the bass's video. What that means is that the times between this bass's sequence and the master sequence still match. If we hadn't added that black video, and let me show you, if I delete it and I just nest like this, the resulting sequence will have his video starting at the 0, point. So that's not correct, because if we go to the second scene, you can see it's at 0 seconds and 18 frames. But if we want to go to 0 seconds and 18 frames here to see if they're the same, you can see that they're not the same. In order to maintain correct timing consistency between all your sequences, that black placeholder essentially needs to be there. Don't worry if that didn't make sense, just do what I say. So now that our black video is back, I was just undoing a bunch of stuff. Right click, nest, and I'll fast forward. So I've completed the process for everybody's clip. Now everything is green on our master timeline. Everything should be green. Green just represents that it's a nested sequence. So these clips on the master sequence, I'm going to call them nested sequences. So this is the tenor 2 nested sequence. This is the tenor 1 nested sequence. When I open the tenor 2 nested sequence, I see the raw video, the tenor 2 raw video. So The reason why there's these blank video tracks here is because when I nested in the original sequence, he was on the 5th track. So I'm just going to right click, delete tracks, and check delete video tracks and select all empty tracks. That will make it a little more visually appealing if I ever need to look inside the sequence. So I'm going to do that to everybody's nested sequences. Okay, so now everybody's individual nested sequences, when I open them, they're pretty visually appealing, make sure everything's organized, and I'm just going to remove this empty track here. Now we have everything we need to get to the heart of the project. The first thing we want to do is put our transitions back in to the master sequence. You can see that the transition times are still kind of in everybody's individual nested sequences because we nested the clips after we cut them. So this is the first transition, this is the second transition, this is the third transition, and this is the fourth. So you might call this, I guess, the 0th scene, the first scene, the second scene, the third scene, and the fourth scene. And because we sliced and then nested, everybody's timings are exactly consistent. So just to double check, I can look at the last scene, shift home to go to the beginning of that cut clip, look 12:29, and just check on everybody's 12:29, 12:29, 12:29, and the reason that it's correct is because we included this black video here. And finally, 12:29. So that's going to make things a lot easier down the line if we have to manually adjust transitions in each person's nested sequence. So let's add the transition times back in here. I'll just select this, razor tool, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click. So now we've added back in the transitions. So this is the 0th scene, the first scene, the second scene, third and fourth, etc. Something important about Premiere is that every track that you can put is kind of like a reference to the track. So when I cut, it's not cutting the actual raw video itself. And I'll show you why that's important to know, because it's kind of annoying that we have these slices in our golden track. So I'm going to delete those bits, but because this isn't just the raw cut audio, I can extend it back to where it's supposed to be. It's a reference to the original audio. So when I extend it, it just essentially reminds itself that it's something bigger. Hey, future me, butting in again real quick. Before we move on, now's the point at which you want to fix every instance of somebody recording their video at a lower quality than 1920 by 1080. What that means is that in their nested sequence, there will be black bars surrounding their video because the scale of their video, you can think about it being smaller because it's at a lower quality. What you want to do is scale their raw video up inside their nested sequence. You want to do whatever you can to get rid of those black bars. So, like for example, if someone records at a half quality lower, you're going to want to scale them up by 200%. And this also works if somebody recorded vertically. You're just going to do your best to fix that. You're going to scale them up something like 300%. And their face is going to be humongous. But the really important thing is you get rid of any black bars in their nested sequence. And you do that by scaling up their raw video and copying that motion effect onto each little scene within their nested sequence so that there are no black bars in their entire nested sequence.